Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy. Martin Luther, Part 12. I'm your host for today, Pymander the Aquarian, filling in for Gwydion, because of course Gwydion doesn't like reading Martin Luther.
Actually, I think I'm ready.
Hey Gwydion, how come you're... What do you mean you're ready? What are you ready for?
I mean, I'm ready to read Martin Luther. I don't need you to fill in for me anymore.
Okay. Why the sudden change?
I'm not exactly sure. I've been keeping up. I've been listening to the recitals that you and BP and Edward have been doing, and I don't know. I think it was more the idea of Martin Luther or things that I had heard about him. I mean, maybe he changes later in life, but at least at this point, when he's doing these 8 sermons in Lent, or I don't know. I don't dislike what he's saying. I mean, I think that if I were alive in 1522 in that area, I would have either wanted to be Martin Luther, or I would have been a little bit envious that he was the one up there saying all this stuff. I think I aspire to be that kind of self-righteous contrarian, that he exemplifies in that era.
All right, well, I suppose being a self-righteous contrarian is a step in the right direction. What do you mean?
Just that there are worse things to be than a self-righteous contrarian.
Of course there are. It's the best.
Speak your truth.
What are you talking about, my truth? It's the truth.
As the divine guardian Shemesh once said, thou shouldst call nothing common or unclean, that a man or woman who seeks a good or fancied good, be it what it may, even if it be merely sensual lust, which to him or her seems the best thing, is all unknown to himself or herself, seeking him the master. The soul is young, the ideal is low and primitive, but nevertheless, it is an ideal. By degrees, other ideals will be substituted for the lower ones. Feed my lambs, said the master, not drive them into your own favorite pasture.
You really don't think that that's maybe a little condescending?
Why don't we talk about this another time? Right now, people have tuned in to hear some Martin Luther, so...
Right. We shouldn't delay any further. Editor Edward, what is this music?
It's the soundtrack to the Neverhood, that old PC game.
Are you Editor Edward?
We're all Editor Edward sometimes.
All right, well, could you put on something, I don't know, a little less silly? That's better. All right, I'm here full time again. I'm ready for the Martin Luther. I just had some processing I needed to go through first. And anyway, if this is your first time and you would like to start at the beginning of the Martin Luther playlist, or maybe you need to catch up on a few episodes, check out Martin Luther 8, the one recorded in Shillong if you haven't already. Here's the playlist, the Martin Luther playlist. I wasn't pointing to the emotional support demon, I was pointing to the playlist. And, all right, without further ado, I will go ahead and get to the reading. All right, a little bit of further ado on account of the fact that even though it's raining today and it's not as hot as usual, it's very humid, and so it helps have the AC running. Don't use air conditioning. It's bad for the environment. Okay, let's pick up where we left off last time. The 5th sermon, Thursday, March 13th, 1522. We have heard about things that are necessary, such as how the Mass is not to be performed as a sacrifice. And we've heard about things that are not necessary, such as monks leaving the monasteries, the marriage of priests, and the images being kept in churches. We have seen how we need to handle such things, that no compulsion or statute ought to be enforced regarding them, and how no one should be compelled to perform such actions or prohibited from doing them by force. We must permit God's word alone to do the work. Now let us look at how to celebrate the sublime sacrament. Oh, excuse me. That's better. Yes. You have heard me preach against the ridiculous rules of the Pope, and how I stood against them. For example, that no woman, even though she is a celibate nun, may wash the altar clothes on which Christ's body had rested, unless those linens had been previously cleaned by a celibate priest. All right, so Martin Luther is standing against that rule, which he calls ridiculous, which is a rule of the Pope. Mid-sentence, I was starting to think, wait, Martin Luther is saying this? No, he's saying it's ridiculous. Okay, just to be clear. Pretty progressive for 1522. You can at least say that. Right. And how, if a lay person touches the body of Christ, the priests rush over immediately to scrub those fingers, parentheses, and there's a lot more of this sort of thing, end parentheses. Yet, if a young woman were to sleep with a priest, the Pope looks the other way and allows it to happen. Different time, it was when young women were the target of predatory priests, apparently, I assume. And if she becomes pregnant and delivers a child, then the Pope closes his eyes to that, too. He won't let them disturb the altar clothes and the sacrament. But if a priest latches on to it in both kinds, then that's fine. I'm not really sure what he's saying there. Latches onto it. Well, anyway, we've preached against these sorts of foolish laws and uncovered them to show that there is no sin connected to the Pope's ridiculous rules and regulations, and that lay folks do not sin if they touch the cup or the body of Christ with their hands. You should give thanks to God that you have come to such clear knowledge, which many wonderful people have lacked. Many wonderful police academy. Anyway, wonderful, wonderful people. But now you're acting just as foolish as the Pope. Ooh. So this is Martin Luther talking to the early Protestant rebels, telling them what he's about to tell them. What is he telling them? If you think people have to hold the sacrament in their hands, if you want to show how good a Christian you are by touching the sacrament with your hands, and you're using the sacrament, parentheses, our most valuable treasure, end parentheses, in such a way, then it's a wonder you have not been struck to the ground by thunder and lightning. Of all the things God can tolerate, this he cannot allow, because you have made a requirement out of it. Right. Okay. And if you don't quit, the emperor, parentheses, or any of his underlings, end parentheses, won't need to drive me out of here. I will gladly go. And I tell you, although my enemies have caused me so much great sorrow, none of them has hurt me as deeply as you have. There's a deeper point here, somewhere in there, that for folks who reject, I'm not saying it's wrong. It's perfectly understandable to reject especially if it's kind of a simplistic interpretation or implementation or practice of a tradition or religion or whatever of one's youth, whether it be Christianity or Islam or Hinduism or whatever. If one is raised a certain way and then they reject that and leave, then one must use discernment to determine and do some deep soul searching and be aware that you're brainwashed. So sometimes you have to look underneath what appears to be common sense or obvious to determine which parts of the dogma, which rules, which taboos, which things that were enforced upon you should be outright rejected. Which things should be done actually the opposite way? Which things should not necessarily be done the opposite way, but be shrugged off as not important, a so what, if you will. And which things are actually good ideas. And in different categories. Which of the things that you were raised with are you going to personally reject? Which of the things that you were raised with are you going to personally uphold? Which can be difficult because of the association with whatever the bad taste in your mouth was. For example, if you had hyper-religious parents or a hyper-religious grandfather, grandmother, uncle, aunt who also beat you or verbally abused you or emotionally abused you, then there's going to be a knee-jerk reaction to do the opposite of what they told you to do, which is perfectly understandable for a while, for maybe even a few years. But at a certain point, you should also get over that. There are a few folks out there who, maybe were raised to be evangelists, going door to door or that kind of thing, converting people, and then after they have their about face, then they feel the need to convert people to, against the religion, or convert people to atheism, or save people from the religion that was trying to save them from the atheism, that kind of thing. And there's nuance, and it's more than just finding a group of like-minded people who also reject the same thing you reject, and then accepting all of the things that they put forth as their dogmas, or choosing which camp of the rejectors you're going to run with, and then making sure that you're in alignment. I think it's important to be willing to be ostracized by the group of the fellow rejectors of the religion to find objective truth as best you can and live it. And on whatever level, as seriously or as lightly or as subtly or as grossly as is appropriate, at whatever stage you're at in your process, at whatever stage you're at in your life, because there's also the process you're going through. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is this is kind of what is going on right here, is there were people that were saying, the church says you have to be celibate, so we say you have to be married. The church is saying the layperson can't touch the host, so we're saying the layperson must touch the host. And Martin Luther is saying, guys, it's ridiculous that there's that rule, but it's equally ridiculous to make the opposite rule, the upside down rule. If somebody is traditional in whatever context, and then you either make a rule or an understanding within whatever subculture, community, or even within yourself that one must strive to behave in a way that's anti-traditional. If they say red, you say blue. If they say go, you say stop. If they say up, you say down. If they say this, you say that. Then you're still wearing the shackles. You've just flipped the shackles upside down. In order to be free from the shackles, you need to be operating based on a true north compass, which, believe it or not, you can find. And you may need to go through a period of existential nihilism on the way there. But understand, I would say, that that's not the end itself. It's a stage that should be confronted, not avoided because of fear. There's, I remember watching, there was a woman who was raised very religious, then she went to college in a city and learned about things other than the very strict, very limiting kind of religion that she was raised with, and learned about science, and learned that the world was round, and that the earth went around the sun, and that the sun was in this thing called a galaxy. And then one day she went on a YouTube rabbit hole and found the flat earth community. And now she's come to realize that the feeling of meaninglessness and that hollow emptiness that she felt when she was learning that science and confronting the fact that maybe the religion she was raised with was just something man-made, that was all a conspiracy of evil men in power to convince you that the world isn't flat, that it's not just a projection, the sky isn't just a projection. And now she's seen, 150 of these flat earth videos, and now she understands the true divine nature of humanity on the flat earth, and she understands that the evil Satan has created this science that for 4 years she was immersed in and going through a sense of existential dread. So that's kind of like, not to say, like Pymander pointed out, the Cromlech quote, it's a good quote actually, people have their ideal. And it's good that they have an ideal. And if you give them time, especially on a time scale of many lifetimes, then they'll get off. They'll come off of it. They'll move on to other things, and then they'll even backslide, and they'll seem worse off than they were 1,000 years ago. But then another 1,000 years later, another 100,000 lifetimes later, you'll meet up with them and be like, oh my God, you finally got your shit together. But if you're trying to get them to come off of it in one conversation, or in 1 week, or in 1 year, or in one period of a decade, or however long, you will be frustrated. Believe me. If you think that, if you put value on if you derive ego value from whether or not you can get someone to come off of it and replace their, let's say, inferior ideal with a superior ideal that you have to offer, then you're the one that needs to come off of it. Actually, if you're the one assigning yourself such a guru mentor position that you're beating yourself up because you can't get that other person to come off of it. Give them 100,000 lifetimes. Give them space to come off of it. They will on their own. If you want more of this sort of idea, then check out this recital here, Transformations. I'll get back to the reading now. Otherwise, we'll never finish. Okay. But now, where were we? Touching the hands, you cannot allow it. Underlings. Thunder and lightning. Of all the things God can tolerate, this he cannot allow because you have made a requirement out of it. And if you don't quit it, the emperor of it, I will gladly go. And I tell you, although my enemies have caused me so much great sorrow, none of them has hurt me as deeply as you have. Martin Luther talking to his followers, saying, by making these stupid rules that are just the Catholic rules upside down, rather than going back to the scripture, because this is the ballpark that he's working within, but we can use it as an interesting allegory and apply it to other things, whether it be Scientology or the Moonies or whatever cult it is at whatever stage. So, like, if you're leaving Scientology to create Earhart Seminars training, then you're a little bit like Martin Luther, more so than if you're leaving. Never mind. You know what I'm saying? Anybody? All right, where were we? If you think that you need to show off how good a Christian you are by handling the sacrament and bragging about it to the whole world, then Herod and Pilate are the top and best of all Christians, because to my eyes, they truly handled the body of Christ. Yeah, they certainly did. When they nailed him to the cross. Yeah, we get it. And put him to death. Yeah, we know. We get it. Yeah, but there were people in the audience, perhaps, that needed their hand held through that interesting analogy. Dear friends, God's reign, R-E-I-G-N, not R-A-I-N, this stuff. It's raining today. It's nice. Anyway, God's reign is not physical or outward objects. Is not in physical or outward objects. Those things we are able to touch or sense, but in faith, bracket parentheses, Luke 17:20, Romans 14:17, 1 Corinthians 4:20. Spark it if you got it. Spark it if you got it. I don't got it, so I can't spark it, but I can take a sip of coffee and pretend. End bracket parentheses. Corinthians 4:20. I'm going to have to read that just to find out. All right. Now you say, that'd be a fun... Oh, that'd be so cool. All right. Here's a fun idea. Smoke some weed. I'm not advocating smoking weed if it is illegal in the state or country in which you live. However, I'm just saying, as just a general hypothetical, if you smoke some weed and then go through and read chapter 4, verse 20 of every book in the Bible, that sounds like a fun idea. Has anybody done that before? I can't be the first person to have thought of that. Now you could say, quote, we should live according to the Bible, and that's what we're doing. God has instituted the sacrament so that we must take it with our hands. After all, Christ did say, quote within quotes, take and eat, this is my body. End quote within quotes, end quote. I would respond like this. Although I am completely convinced that the Lord's disciples took it with their hands, and although I admit that you may do the same without committing sin, I still cannot make it compulsory or defend doing so. Defend making it compulsory. Also, just to play devil's advocate or Pope's advocate, same thing if you're Martin Luther-ish. The apostles touching it with their hands is kind of the same thing as the priests with the apostolic succession touching it with their hands. Did the apostles receive the bread from Christ and say, wow, hey, waiter, hey, come, garçon, touch it. Okay, now I'm going to eat it. No, they didn't. They said, hey, garçon, let me shove this in your mouth without you touching it. No, they didn't do that either. Anyway, yes. Although, yes, doing so. My reason is that the devil, when he corners us, will argue, quote, where have you read in the scriptures that, quote, take, end quote, within quotes, means, quote, within quotes, grasping with the hands, end quote, within quotes, question mark, end quote. That's a good point. To take does not necessarily mean to grasp with one's hands. Do you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife? I mean, whatever, I didn't mean to suggest anything by the shape. My hands made just that. Have you seen episode 6 yet? Season 4 of The Boys? The ending is pretty squirty. All right, where were we? Listen to this, my good fellow. Nope. Take means grasping with the hands. How then are you going to prove or defend your practice? Indeed. How will you answer him when he cites from the scriptures the very opposite and proves that take does not mean to receive with the hands only, but also to convey to ourselves in other ways? Take this doesn't mean take it in your hands necessarily. Quote, listen to this, my good fellow, end quote. He will say, quote, is not the word take used by 3 evangelists when they describe the Lord's taking of gall and vinegar? You must admit that the Lord did not touch or handle it with his hands, for his hands were nailed to the cross. Yeah, no, we got it. I got it. You didn't need to explain. End quote. This verse is a tough argument against me, and when he cites the passage, et acceptit omnis timor, quote, and fear took hold of them all, end quote, we have to admit that fear has no hands. Maybe for you. With all of this, I am driven into a corner and have to give up. Quote, to take, end quote, not only means to use one's hands, but to receive something in a number of different possible ways. That's what I'm saying. A number, and that number is 3 if you're a girl, 2 if you're a boy. All right, dear friends, we must stand on solid ground if we are to withstand the devil's attack. Bracket parentheses Ephesians 6:11 end parentheses. Is that where the devil attacks? Although I must acknowledge that you committed no sin when you touched the sacrament with your hands, nevertheless I must tell you that it was not a good work because it caused offense everywhere. Simply because the universal custom is to receive the blessed sacrament from the hands of the priest. Why will you not in this respect also serve those who are weak in faith and abstain from your liberty, particularly because it does not help you if you do it, nor harm you if you do not do it? Therefore, no new practices should be introduced, unless the gospel has first been thoroughly preached and understood, as it has been among you. On this account, dear friends, let us deal soberly and wisely in the things that pertain to God, for God will not be mocked. Bracket parentheses Galatians 6:7. I don't know. Is anybody going to look up these references? And bracket parentheses. The saints may endure mockery, but with God it is vastly different. Therefore, I beseech you, give up this practice. Okay, so now we have one of those title headings, which I'm 99% certain is something that the Penguin people have decided to set, this as a chapter heading, not a chapter. We're still in the same. He's still he finished one paragraph and he's about to start another paragraph. I don't think at this point he named the title of what he's about to talk about now. That was Penguin Books deciding to call this next section Concerning Both Kinds in the Sacrament. So that's what the rest of this lecture is going to be about. Now let us speak of the 2 kinds. Although I hold that it is necessary that the sacrament should be received in both kinds. Do you mean bread and wine, I assume? According to the institution of the Lord, nevertheless, it must not be made compulsory nor a general law. We must rather promote and practice and preach the word, and then afterward leave the result and execution of it entirely to the word, with capital W, giving everyone his freedom in this matter. Where this is not done, the sacrament becomes for me an outward work and a hypocrisy, which is just what the devil wants. But when the word is given free course and is not bound to any external observance, it takes hold of one believer today and sinks into their heart. Tomorrow it touches another, and so on. Thus, quietly and soberly, it does its work, and no one will know how it all came about. Okay, so I hear you with the preaching of the word is more important than taking the communion, which is, from a Catholic perspective, that would be considered controversial, but from a Protestant or neutral third-party observer, it's all right, okay, sure. Because, if Jesus had come and just not said anything, never once, didn't give the Sermon on the Mount, didn't talk to anybody, and then just out of the blue to 12 random guys was take and eat this. This is my body. This is my blood. And if they were weird, but all right, I don't know. Would that have done anything? Would there have been a Christianity? Would there have been any kind of effect at all? Where if he had come and gave the teachings, but then omitted that one step, maybe they wouldn't have had the Eucharist, but Who knows? Anyway, all right, where were we? So I'm not really sure. I know in Eastern Orthodox what they do is they mix the bread in the wine, and then they give you, with a little spoon, they give you some wine soaked in, some bread soaked in wine, and it's like fluffy bread. As opposed to in Roman Catholicism, it's a little wafer of unleavened bread, like it's always Passover in the Roman Catholic Church. And it's cheaper, I think, is the real reason. You can mass produce it more effectively. And then the wine separately. So maybe that's what he means by taking it as two sacraments or taking it as one sacrament. I'm not really sure what he's talking about. Or if he's talking about taking it both ways, when the priest puts it in your mouth, or if you take it and say thanks and put it in your mouth. I don't know. I was glad to know when someone wrote me that some people here had begun to receive the sacrament in both kinds. You should have allowed it to remain thus and not forced it into a law. Okay, I think that he's saying, in both kinds, like the priest puts it in your mouth, or you take it from the priest's hand and put it in your mouth. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, sure. Yeah, whatever. Whichever you prefer. Whatever feels right in the moment. Yes. But now you go at it pell-mell and headlong, force everyone to it. What? Dear friends, you will not succeed in that way, because if you desire to be regarded as better Christians than others, simply on account of taking the sacrament into your hands and also receiving it in both kinds, then you are bad Christians as far as I am concerned. In this way, even a sow could be a Christian. That must have made sense when Penguin translated this. S-O-W. For she has a big enough snout to receive the sacrament outwardly. Maybe a kind of animal or bird? I don't know. We must deal soberly with such high things. Dear friends, this dare be no mockery, and if you are going to follow me, stop it. If you're going to call yourself a Lutheran, don't do this. You can be Anabaptist or whatever, Unitarian, all the other different Reformationists, Protestantists. If you are not going to follow me, however, then no one need drive me away from you. I will leave you unasked, and I shall regret that I ever preached so much as one sermon in this place. The other things could be passed by, but this cannot be overlooked. For you have gone so far that people are saying at Wittenberg there are very good Christians, for they take the sacrament in their hands and grasp the cup, and then they go to their brandy and swill themselves full. So the weak and well-meaning people who would come to us if they had received as much instruction as we have are driven away. However, if there are people who are so smart that they must necessarily touch the sacrament with their hands, then let them have it delivered to their homes, and there let them hold it too as long as they want. In public, though, let them stay away, because that won't hurt them, and it won't offend our brothers, sisters, and neighbors, those who are so mad at us right now that they would kill us. I would say again that of all my enemies who have opposed me up to this time, none of them have hurt me as much as you. This is enough for today. Tomorrow we shall say more. So, this is kind of, it seems like a small point, but it's kind of like he's saying, do it exactly the way the Catholics do it. But secretly, know that it doesn't have to be done that way. It's like he wants this new Lutheran church to look as much like the Catholic Church as possible. Which is kind of like, okay, like, are you even a rebel, man? Are you, sort of like, what do they say? When someone comes along and they're like, let's make it, democratic socialism, and then someone comes along and they say, one step at a time. I forget what that's called. You know what I'm talking about, though, right? The people are like, yeah, everything's completely fucked, and the world's going to end in 30 years, but if you elect me, then I will take steps to make it so that the world won't end for 35 years. And we'll take one small step, one sort of meaningless gesture toward democratic socialism that will get completely knocked down by Congress, and there will be no changes whatsoever. I'm trying to remember the name of that. Like One Step at a Time. Anyway, enough about that. Yeah, okay, well, I'm glad to be back on the roster for this, and look forward to next time. And I'm sure Pymander will be back. He always wants to pop in to promote his Buddhist book stuff, and so you won't. This isn't the last you'll see of him. But next time the wheel lines up and says Gwydion and Martin Luther, it'll just be me reciting Martin Luther, and it won't be a continuation of all the drama, the Pymander, Gwydion, Martin Luther drama. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then go to the Chicken Philosophy page and go to down to the Martin Luther playlist, and you can find the ones that are Gwydion Martin Luther. You'll see the hat in the profile pic, in the thumbnail, and you can watch the first 5 to 10 minutes of each of those episodes to see how this drama has evolved and how it resulted in me becoming a bodhisattva, and everything that kind of happened in the past few episodes. All right, I guess that's it, and thank you all for tuning in. For the people who are still watching, what are you doing, man? I know there's one guy who was like, I hope you don't mind, but I just sort of leave it on in the background while I do other things. I appreciate that, Matthew. I'm glad to have you, and that's a perfectly wonderful. It warms my heart to hear that. That is a perfectly good use of Chicken Philosophy. And but for anybody who's watching this right now, who hasn't followed me on social media, Instagram and Facebook, do feel free to write down or remember Chicken Philosophus. Like the grade, it's like Chicken Philosophy, but instead of a Y, it's a US. And then go to Instagram and type in Chicken Philosophus, all one word, and then hit follow. And go to Facebook and type in Chicken Philosophy, either with a space or without a space. Either one should get you there, and you can follow and like the Facebook page. But more importantly than that is, if you've got this on full screen right now, then just kind of tap the screen and then click this so that it minimizes, and then you can kind of see what's going on underneath down there, and then give this a like and hit subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And until next time.